Hello, and welcome to episode 16 of our Exodus series. Who can remember what we said in our last story about rules? Who has the right to decide rules that are going to be kept somewhere? And why could Yahweh decide rules for the Israelites? What made these rules different from the rules we usually have to keep? And can you remember what was the absolute most important of all the rules Yahweh gave to the Israelites? Let's read it again together before we start our story today. I'm going to read from Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 to 5. And God spoke all these words. I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. So, the most important rule is that the Israelites can't have any other gods. They should only worship Yahweh. After Yahweh spoke from Mount Sinai to all the Israelites, and he gave them the 10 Commandments, he called Moses to come up the mountain to him, where he would write these rules on tablets of stone, and where he would tell him about other jobs he has for the Israelites. So Moses went up the mountain, and the whole of the Israelite nation stayed under the mountain and waited for Moses to come back and tell them what Yahweh had told him. But when Yahweh calls you to have a conversation with him, how long is it going to last? An hour or two? A day or two? The Israelites wait and wait, and they are very impatient because their leader has left and they don't know what to do. And you know what? Moses doesn't show up for a very long time. A day passes, then 2, a week, 2 weeks. Moses hasn't come back for 2 full weeks, and everyone is starting to feel really uneasy. What if something has happened to him? Do you remember that when Moses had met Yahweh in the burning bush, Yahweh told him to take off his sandals, for the land where he stands was holy? And now Moses walked right into the cloud on top of the mountain, much closer to Yahweh than any man has ever lived on this earth since Adam has been. The Israelites knew how strong and powerful Yahweh is, because they could remember how he killed every firstborn in Egypt that wasn't protected by the blood on the door. They could also remember how he drowned a whole Egyptian army in the Red Sea. What if Yahweh got angry with Moses, and now Moses would never come back? But the Israelites decided to keep waiting. Did you ever have to wait for something for a very long time? What is it like to have to wait for something for a very long time? And what must it be like when you don't know when it's going to come? Moses didn't come back for another week. He had already been gone for 3 weeks. People feel very worried. What is going to happen to them now they have no leader? They wait for another week, but Moses still didn't come back. So the people decided that they have to deal with the situation somehow. Listen to what they did. I'm going to read from Exodus chapter 32, verses 1 to 6. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses, who has brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. Aaron answered them, Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing, and bring them to me. So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. Then they said, These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there will be a festival to Yahweh." So the next day, the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterward, they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. The Israelites broke the main rule of Yahweh. They forgot what their God was like and how he defeated all the false gods in Egypt. They built exactly the same kind of golden statue that they used to see in Egypt when they started worshipping this statue. They even started claiming that this golden calf they built was actually Yahweh who brought them out of Egypt. What do you think Yahweh did when he saw what was happening at the Israelite camp? I'm going to read Exodus chapter 32, verses 7 through 10. Then Yahweh said to Moses, "Go down, because your people, whom you brought out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them, and they have made themselves an idol, cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it, and have said, 'These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt.' I have seen these people," Yahweh said to Moses, "and they are a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation." Yahweh got very, very angry. He wanted to destroy all of the Israelites. But Moses asked God to forgive the Israelites. Listen to what he told Yahweh. I'm going to read from chapter 32, verses 11 to 13. But Moses sought the favor of Yahweh his God. "Yahweh," he said, "why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, 'It was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains, and to wipe them off the face of the earth'? Turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self, 'I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give your descendants all this land that I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever.'" Moses begged Yahweh to remember the promise he gave to Abraham and his plan to bring the Israelites to the promised land. What would other nations think of Yahweh? That he rescued his people with his mighty hand just to destroy them in the desert? Did you notice that Moses wasn't trying to tell Yahweh that he should forgive the Israelites because what they did wasn't really that bad? No, he is asking Yahweh to forgive them because of who he is, because of who Yahweh is. Moses is telling Yahweh to forgive because of the promise Yahweh made and can't break. He is asking him to forgive them because of Yahweh's glory and that the whole world could see when he saved his people from Egypt. And Yahweh listened to Moses. I'm going to read chapter 32, verse 14. Then Yahweh relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened. Do you think that something similar could have happened with us today as Christians? To the people who believe that Jesus died for them on the cross and that he would come back to them and bring them to his eternal kingdom? Christians today would probably not build some kind of golden statue and claim that the statue is their God or Jesus. But in the same way the Israelites didn't know when Moses was going to come back, we also don't know when Jesus will return for us. And things can often look really shaky in the meantime. You might go to a small church with your parents, and not many people seem to be coming to your church. We know that God has told us to teach the truth about Him from the Bible, but sometimes we might be afraid that it takes too long or just doesn't really work because most people don't seem to believe it. Maybe we think we should try other things to make people want to come to church. Maybe we should bring in a bouncy castle to our Sunday school, and maybe more children would want to come to church then. Then the church would look bigger and stronger. But God says we can trust Him. We can trust He is a true God, and His plans for His people are right and good. The best thing for us to do is to know Him and live by His rules, because He brought us to Himself. We don't want to trust anything else but Him. Next episode, we will look back at everything we have learnt about Yahweh our God. See you then.